Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Donovan's Daily Dose. I'm your favorite APUSH history teacher, Mr. Donovan, and today we're going to talk about John Adams' presidency, our second president. So let's dive in with some context. John Adams was the vice president of George Washington, our first president, and as Washington is leaving the presidency in 1796, in his famous farewell address, he warns America about the dangers of political factions or political parties. And ironically, parties start to emerge as soon as he leaves, with two of them being the Federalists, who believe in a strong federal government, and the Democratic Republicans, who believe that more power should go to the state governments. You can think of the Democratic Republicans as very similar to the anti-Federalists of the Constitutional Convention. Now, to show this kind of division going on, let's take a look at the Electoral College map of 1796. As you can see from this map, there is some regional tensions being shown. A lot of the New England and North region is going to go to Adams, whereas in a lot of the South, it's going to go to Jefferson. And this sets the scene for the Adams presidency, which is filled with conflict, not only because Jefferson is his vice president. At this time, the second place runner-up for the presidential election would become vice president, but also we have ongoing conflicts that get America involved in foreign affairs, which Washington warns us about as well. Now, one of the big foreign affairs that we're involved in has to do with France. So to set the scene, in 1794 with Jay's Treaty, George Washington sends John Jay to negotiate a treaty with the British that would remove their forces from the Northwest Territory of the U.S. And then along with this, they want to establish trade with Britain again. Now, this upsets France very deeply, right? They helped us break up with them. And in response to this newfound economic relationship between the British and the Americans, the French Navy begins to attack American merchant ships starting in 1797. So President John Adams sends some diplomats, some representatives of the American government to try to create a treaty between the United States and France. And this leads to what we know as the XYZ Affair. Now, upon arrival, the three delegates sent by John Adams meet with three French diplomats who are nicknamed X, Y, and Z, hence the XYZ Affair. And these three delegates proceed to ask for bribes to start negotiations. And this gets the American public frustrated and furious at the French. Right? They were on our side before. Now they're trying to extort us for money. And the famous quote comes from this time period, and it says, "It's millions for defense, but not a single cent for tribute." This comes from a representative of the American government and basically shows how America will not be taken advantage of on this international stage. Due to the lack of the treaty between the French and the United States government, there will be an undeclared naval war called a Quasi War for roughly the next couple years between the United States and France. Now, while that's going on, we also have some domestic issues starting to take place, and a lot of them are a result of the XYZ Affair. So one of the biggest ones is the Alien and Sedition Acts. So the Alien Act was created to allow the federal government to deport non-citizens who they thought were a threat to national security. Along with this, we see the Sedition Act pass, which is supposed to punish American citizens who criticize the American government during wartime with the intent to hurt the government's position. Now, Democratic Republicans, who were mentioned previously in the video, see this as a gross abuse of federal power. They are really concerned that this federal government is becoming tyrannical, that they are trying to silence critics. They believe that the Sedition Acts is a violation of the First Amendment, freedom of speech. And one piece of evidence that they use to kind of justify this is the case of Matthew Lyon. Matthew Lyon is a United States congressman. He is a Democratic Republican who is jailed for criticizing President Adams in a Republican newspaper. So because of this, we see two important doctrines come up, and they're co-authored by James Madison and Thomas Jefferson. And those are called the Kentucky and Virginia Resolutions. And what these documents basically say is that in the eyes of Jefferson and Madison, states have the right to nullify, meaning they get to ignore, any federal laws that they interpret as outside the powers given to the federal government. So instead of the Supreme Court determining what the Constitution means, Madison and Jefferson argue that state governments should decide. Now, in this case, the big things to remember about Adams' presidency, first, not only is he the first one-term president, we are going to start seeing a transition of power from Federalists to Democratic Republicans. The fear of an abusive federal government becomes synonymous with the Federalist Party. And due to this, the Democratic Republicans are going to dominate American politics at the national, local, and state level during the early 1800s. After Adams loses re-election in 1800, Jefferson will be president for 8 years as a Democratic Republican. Then after him will be James Madison, who is also a Democratic Republican, and then James Monroe, who is also a Democratic Republican. So there it is, folks, the Adams presidency and the impacts. Have an awesome rest of your day.